Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to 18th century Sweden, where the winters are long, the nights are longer, and the only thing standing between you and absolute darkness is a stubby little candle made of questionable animal fats. You're wrapped in layers of wool, your breath fogs the air inside your own house, and even the dog looks like he's wearing socks. It's the kind of world where you don't just light a candle, you practically worship it. Your room flickers gently. One flame. Just enough light to eat a bowl of barley mush, mend a hole in your sock, or write a politely worded letter of complaint to the tax office, which you probably won't send, because you're Swedish. And you're polite. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I mean it. Don't force it. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Always love reading those sleepy comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is 1703. You step out into a pale blue dusk that seems to last forever. It's only 3 p.m., but the sun is packing up for the day, and the shadows have taken over completely. You trudge down a narrow lane between snowbanks taller than your shoulders, wrapped in every scrap of wool you own. And even then, your nose has given up trying to feel anything. Inside homes, candles have already been lit. Just 1 or 2 per room, if that. They sputter slightly in the cold drafts that snake in from window frames. Glass isn't exactly tight-fitting in this era. Every flame is a decision. Light means safety, comfort, possibly conversation. But light also means money. Or it will, very soon. People in Sweden have been using candles for centuries, of course. Tallow ones for the everyday folks. Those are made from animal fats and tend to smell like a stew left out too long. And beeswax for the well-to-do. Beeswax smells a bit nicer, burns more cleanly, and lasts longer. But regardless of your social standing, if you live in this frigid corner of the world, you need candles just to make it through the day. And what does every government love more than something people need? That's right, something to tax. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. You enter a modest home, where a family of 5 is already gathered around their candle-lit supper. There's a single stub of wax stuck in an iron holder in the center of the table. It casts strange, soft shadows across their faces as they spoon up thin cabbage soup and chew dense rye bread. The children are silent, partly because it's too cold to talk, and partly because they're waiting for Father to share tonight's one amusing story. It's about a goat who accidentally walked into the bishop's study last week. Hilarious, truly. You nestle yourself in the corner. Invisible, but watching. The candle flickers as someone opens a door, letting in a gust of air and the smell of snow and hay. The flame dips low but doesn't go out. You're struck by how delicate it feels, how every movement in the house dances in that soft golden light. The entire pace of life slows to match it. And this really is the thing. A candle isn't just a light. It's a timer, a boundary. It says, this is how long we can read, pray, talk, sew, hope, or argue tonight. When it's gone, so is the evening. In bigger towns, things are a bit livelier. You walk into a shop that sells shoes, and also, for some reason, dried fish. There's a candle lit near the register, partly to illuminate the ledgers, partly to keep the ink from freezing. The shopkeeper nods to you. He thinks you're just another tired customer, and he's not wrong. You warm your hands near the flame. It's barely warmer than the air, but it's something. In the back room, there's a box of home-rolled tallow candles. They're lumpy, hand-dipped, slightly crooked. They'll sell for a few eur each, more than a loaf of bread, but less than a bolt of fabric. In some homes, candles are part of the weekly budget. In others, they're used only for Sunday readings or emergency goat births. You pass through churches lit with dozens of flames, each one shivering slightly in the cold, vaulted air. There's something reverent about it, something beyond mere illumination. Candlelight means peace. Candlelight means presence. And in a place where the winter darkness swallows the world by mid-afternoon, candles mean life. No one suspects a tax is coming. Not yet. But the signs are there. Literally. You notice a few official-looking notices pinned up in taverns and markets. Vague language about luxuries of light and fair contributions for communal services. You don't need to be a tax lawyer to smell what's coming. And frankly, it smells like tallow. You slip into a manor house on the edge of town. The family is wealthier here. You can tell by the carpets and the curtains and the actual glass in the windows. They're using beeswax candles, dozens of them, glowing in polished sconces. A dinner party is underway. Wine is flowing. Someone's playing a fiddle badly. A guest says, "I hear the crown may tax candles next." The host laughs and replies, "Let them. We'll just buy more." That laughter will age poorly, because soon, every flame, every little tongue of light that makes the Swedish winter bearable will come with a cost. But not tonight. Tonight, people simply light their candles and move slowly through the evening, reading aloud, sewing quietly, arguing gently about potatoes. And as you follow the soft glow from window to window, you realize the story of Sweden's candle tax won't be a story of revolt or rebellion or raging injustice. No, it'll be the story of a nation that took one more tax, shrugged gently, and went on with its evening. You wake up the next morning, if you can call it that. The sky is barely brighter than soot. Winter mornings in Sweden have a way of looking suspiciously like nights that just gave up. The air inside the house is brittle with cold, and your breath forms tiny clouds that drift toward the rafters like uncertain ghosts. Everyone moves slowly. The fire has gone out, the floor is frozen, and the porridge pot from last night still holds a stubborn crust around its rim. Nobody speaks yet. What would they say? Morning conversation comes later, usually after the candle is lit, and someone remembers where the socks ended up. You're already starting to notice it, though. Candles govern the rhythm of life here. If there isn't one lit, the day hasn't officially begun. The young daughter, maybe 11 years old, pads over to the mantel and uses a long twig to relight the stub from last night. It sputters for a second, then settles into a sleepy glow. Now, things can start. Out in the capital, Stockholm, the powers that be are having very serious meetings. The crown's finances are in a bit of a pinch. Wars cost money. Infrastructure costs money. Maintaining powdered wigs that look like poodles resting on your head? Shockingly expensive. The Swedish government, like many governments throughout history, is looking for ways to raise funds without stirring the pot too much. And here's where the genius, or madness, of the candle tax enters stage left. Some royal advisor, likely sitting in a room that smelled faintly of smoked herring and ink, has an idea. "Candles," he says, probably pausing for dramatic effect. "What if we taxed those?" It's not the worst idea, oddly. Everyone uses candles. They're universal, indispensable, and hard to avoid. And unlike bread or salt, taxing them doesn't directly affect survival. It's just inconvenient. The perfect tax. Historians still argue whether this was the brainchild of a single bureaucrat or a committee of over-caffeinated scribes. But one thing is certain. The plan made it to the king's desk. And he didn't hate it. A tiny duty on candles. A little surcharge on light. The reasoning was elegant in its dullness. Candle production could be measured, especially the official stuff made by guilds. Imports could be monitored. Households could be surveyed. Plus, the church wasn't likely to raise much of a fuss. Candles already figured heavily into religious life, and if anyone had the extra money to pay for illumination, it was the clergy. You wander through the streets of Stockholm and overhear whispers. Nothing dramatic, just shopkeepers muttering about rumors of light taxes, or a landlord joking that soon tenants would have to pay extra to read past sundown. Nobody takes it seriously. Not yet. A few leaflets appear. Nothing flashy. The Swedes are not big on bold headlines. The phrasing is purposefully vague. Something like, in accordance with the fair division of burdens among the king's loyal subjects, it is proposed that a modest duty be levied upon the production and purchase of taper-based light sources. You can almost hear the collective national shrug. To be fair, the Swedes are used to taxes. Taxes on windows, taxes on chimneys, taxes on salt, on lace, on riding horses. A tax on candles? Sure. Why not? It's winter 73% of the year anyway. If you taxed breathing, someone would just knit a very efficient scarf and move on. The initial candle duty is mild, just a few eur per unit, mostly applied at the production and merchant level. The general public barely feels it. If you're wealthy, you don't notice. If you're poor, you were already rationing candles so tightly that one extra coin doesn't even register. What's most fascinating is the lack of reaction. Other countries would riot over this kind of thing. Remember England's window tax? People bricked up entire walls to avoid paying. France? They'd have written angry pamphlets by breakfast and stormed the palace by lunch. But in Sweden, there's a gentle, almost philosophical acceptance. Maybe it's the cold. Maybe it's Lutheranism. Or maybe it's just that candlelight, while essential, isn't sacred. You drift into a schoolhouse where the teacher, wrapped in 3 scarves and still visibly shivering, is explaining basic arithmetic by candlelight. She holds up a stub of wax and says, "This cost 4 eur before. Now it's 5. The students nod, scribble it down, and move on. No tears, no tantrums, just math. Meanwhile, in a larger house not far from the harbor, a minor nobleman is dictating a letter. He pauses mid-sentence, watching the candle beside him drip a lazy bead of wax down its side. He frowns, not at the tax itself, but at the inefficiency of the candle. "We must find ones that burn longer," he mutters. "More light for less money." Innovation through mild irritation. In the markets, candle sellers begin labeling their goods with small handwritten signs. High-quality tallow, long-burning, taxed, but fair. One shop even tries a clever marketing trick. Buy 2, get taxed once. It doesn't work, but you admire the spirit. One merchant, a woman with a slight limp and an eyebrow that raises higher than should be anatomically possible, tells you, "It's just another tax. We light fewer candles, we squint more." The king still gets paid. In taverns, the jokes begin. "What do you call a rich man's window at night? A lighthouse." Another popular one. "I asked for more hours in the day. They gave me a tax on light." And a groaner. "I tried to evade the candle tax. Now I'm in the dark about everything." Still, for the most part, the mood is peaceful. The Swedish public, it turns out, is incredibly skilled at adapting with a quiet sigh and a thick pair of mittens. You move through the city, tracing the new glow of taxed candles in every home. You wonder, will this work? Will a nation taxed by its own light source simply accept it as the new normal? For now, yes. And somewhere in the palace, a royal advisor makes a tiny, smug note in the margins of his leather-bound ledger. Candle tax, low resistance, revenue promising. He probably smiles, just a little. The roads outside the city are quiet now. You drift with the snow, letting the wind carry you to the countryside, where the candle tax is slowly spreading. Not like wildfire, but like a gentle fog. Almost no one notices it at first. It's in the way a merchant frowns while writing a receipt, or the way a farmer counts his coins twice before entering the apothecary. You find yourself in a hamlet so small it doesn't appear on most maps. Just 6 houses, a chapel, and a bakery that also seems to double as a meeting hall, barber shop, and post office, depending on the day. It smells vaguely of flour and burnt sugar. Inside, a single candle flickers on the counter beside a stack of oatcakes. The baker is slicing 1 in half for an old man in woolen layers. "They say it's not much," the old man mutters, handing over a coin. "Just a few here and there, but they'll tax chimney smoke next. Just you wait." The baker shrugs. "We'll just burn smaller fires. Less smoke, less warmth, fewer toes." You watch as the 2 men chuckle. Not angrily, just wearily. The thing about this tax, you realize, is that it's not enforced by brute force. There are no soldiers at the door demanding receipts, no patrols inspecting your pockets for illicit wax, no dungeons for the poorly lit. Instead, there are forms, so many forms. In the regional tax office, an unheated building with a door that creaks like it's sighing every time someone enters, clerks are busily compiling tallies. Sheets of parchment filled with numbers and tiny notations, household sizes, average candle use, bee colony reports. You float past a young scribe dipping her quill into a frozen inkwell, muttering under her breath, "If I record 1 more unit of tallow, I'm going to start eating it." Some households are assigned usage estimates. Larger families get charged more, even if they insist they've switched to oil lamps or go to bed at sunset like well-behaved livestock. The forms don't care. The forms only believe the numbers. Tax collectors, bundled like walking duvets, begin visiting homes to assess light consumption. Not to spy, really, but to verify. They knock politely, ask even more politely, and leave behind a slip of parchment with your assessed tax in lovely calligraphy. You travel with one of them, Carl, a lanky man with a nose like a folded map and the patience of a sleepy cat. He wears mittens so thick he can barely hold his satchel. At each stop he knocks gently, always waits, always smiles. "Evening," he says. "Just checking on your candle usage this quarter. Any changes in household size? Number of wicks? Bees behaving unusually?" Most folks answer honestly. "My brother moved in. He reads a lot." Or, "The dog chewed the candle mold again." Occasionally someone says, "We've switched to goose fat. It smells worse, but it's free." Carl just nods and writes it all down. His handwriting is impeccable, considering he's using frozen fingers and half-frozen ink. One cottage has no light at all, not even a fire burning. Inside, an elderly woman sits by the window, her eyes adjusting to the dark like a cat's. "I stopped using candles last month," she says softly. "Helps the headaches. And the taxes." Carl writes this down too. Historians still debate whether these candle counts were accurate at all. Some argue the data was wildly speculative, gathered by overworked clerks trying to meet quotas before their fingers fell off. Others suggest the Swedes, being naturally fastidious, took the process quite seriously. One even claims a village created a candle registry with serial numbers carved into wax for record keeping. This has never been confirmed, but the image is delightful. You follow Carl back to the town hall, where the collected forms are stacked like a papery glacier waiting to be processed. He adds his satchel to the pile, yawns, and says, "Only 8 more towns this month, if the sled doesn't freeze." In another region, you observe a different method entirely. Some parishes have outsourced the estimation process to the clergy. After all, who knows the habits of a household better than the local priest? So now you've got Father Anders, a man with a beard so large birds probably live in it, wandering through his parish noting which families light candles during evening prayers, who attends services with soot on their fingers, and who seems to be mysteriously well lit in spite of being very devout. "It's not judging," he insists, warming his hands over a parishioner's cooking fire. It's stewardship. Some folks light more candles just to appear pious. Others pretend they've switched to moonlight-only worship to save money. Either way, the tax office gets their reports, and the wheel keeps turning. Meanwhile, in one mountain village, someone gets clever. They hollow out turnips and stuff them with fish oil and moss, creating what might generously be described as an alternative lighting source. It smells awful. It smokes heavily. But it technically isn't a candle, and that's good enough for them. You smile. Creativity through taxation. Not all stories are so endearing. In one home, a young woman weeps over a broken beeswax candle. It was a gift from her grandmother. She'd been saving it for a special night, maybe for a wedding, or a birth, or the return of a loved one. Now it's cracked, unusable, and taxed all the same. Still, no one protests. There are no mobs, no petitions, no wax-stained uprisings. Instead, the country simply adjusts. A few homes darken earlier. Some switch to daylight labor only. In wealthier houses, footmen are tasked with collecting wax drippings to be remelted. Resourceful teenagers start a small trade in leftover wick trimmings. A traveling poet writes an ode called O Candle, Thou Art Light and Liability, which is received with polite applause and no enthusiasm. The tax, while absurd in its premise, quietly succeeds. Revenue trickles in. Budgets stabilize. Roads are mended. Soldiers are fed. Wigs are powdered. And all the while the candles burn, one coin dearer than before. You find yourself back in the city now, standing under a sky the color of bruised linen. The snow has turned to a gritty slush, and your boots squelch as you pass shuttered storefronts and frost-covered windows. Everywhere you look, candles flicker behind thin glass panes, each one now a tiny gold coin slowly melting into air. Inside a narrow apartment above a bakery, you watch as a family eats their supper in near darkness. One small tallow candle burns on the table, set inside a tin dish to catch the drips. The father says nothing, but occasionally glances towards the stub with visible anxiety. The daughter asks a question about her sewing. The mother shakes her head and replies, "Ask tomorrow, when we have more light." This is the shape of the tax now. Not a fist, but a squeeze. Not cruel, but insistent. The quiet pressure of counting candles before you light them. Of asking yourself whether that extra hour of storytelling is really worth the ure. It's especially strange because no one seems truly angry about it, just inconvenienced. You trail a new tax collector, a round-cheeked man named Oscar, with a hat so furry it seems to be slowly digesting his head. His approach to enforcement is gentle, bordering on apologetic. "Just checking," he murmurs at each house. "Won't take but a moment." He apologizes to a cat for stepping on its tail, then apologizes again when he sees the cat didn't seem to mind. At one home, he lingers by the door, squinting inside. "Only one candle?" he asks. The homeowner shrugs. "That's all we can afford this week." Oscar scribbles it down, then quietly leaves a small bundle of tallow candles on the doorstep before walking off. He doesn't mention it again. Historians still argue whether this kind of leniency was typical or rare. Some believe local collectors often fudged their reports to spare their neighbors. Others insist the crown had no interest in real hardship and quietly encouraged discretion. Either way, the candle tax remained in place, but it adapted. It moved like smoke, unobtrusive, curling into the spaces people left open. Back in the city, you visit a guild hall, home of the official candle makers of Stockholm. It smells like beeswax and ambition. Inside, rows of molds hang like brass ghosts from the rafters, and workers in thick aprons pour molten tallow with the concentration of alchemists. Guild records now include full tax documentation. Batches are labeled by weight, shape, scent, and intended usage class. Yes, that's a thing. Candles are now categorized by purpose, religious, domestic, ceremonial, naval, theatrical, and miscellaneous municipal. It's as bureaucratic as it sounds. One journeyman tells you, "We used to make candles by the dozen. Now we make them by the category." Another adds, "I miss when wax was just wax. Now it's paperwork." The irony isn't lost on you. In trying to tax light, the government has accidentally made candle making significantly more boring, which, for our sleepy purposes, is kind of perfect. Further uptown, you slip into a wealthy household. Rich tapestries, velvet chairs, and the faint, arrogant aroma of imported coffee. Here, the candle tax barely registers. They burn beeswax liberally, not just for light, but for ambience. Flames flicker in sconces, dance across silver spoons, illuminate portraits of very stern ancestors. The lady of the house laughs when asked about the tax. "Oh yes, it's terribly inconvenient," she says, lighting a fourth candle for her embroidery. "We had to let go of our candle steward." "You blink, candle steward?" She waves a hand. "Well, he mostly trimmed wicks. It wasn't a real job." In the study, her husband pores over a candle budget like it's a military campaign. He's trying to optimize usage per room. The servants' quarters are now on rotating illumination. Every other night gets a flame. He's experimenting with mirrored backings to reflect more light. "Efficiency," he grumbles, adjusting his spectacles. "That's how empires survive." You can't help but admire the logic, even as you slowly nod off in the corner of his armchair. Outside, things are less efficient. In the poorer quarters, people begin sharing light. Entire households gather in one room to read or sew by a single flame. A shoemaker hosts a light circle, 5 families who take turns supplying the candle for their shared work table. One night, it's beeswax. The next, it's goose fat. The smell is unpredictable, but the companionship is steady. One family constructs a clever rotating mirror contraption. It's mounted on a stool and reflects candlelight across the entire room. It doesn't make things brighter, exactly, but it feels like it does. "It's more democratic light," the father explains proudly. Even the public squares get involved. In Stockholm's center, a group of musicians plays by communal candlelight, funded by donations. There's a sign beside their lantern. 1 euro keeps the flute going for 10 minutes. They raise enough each night to play 3 songs and 1 half-hearted waltz. The clergy, too, must adapt. Churches begin holding earlier services to take advantage of daylight. Candles are saved for weddings, funerals, and Advent. Some congregations go in on bulk orders. A bishop jokingly refers to his flock as the people of the eternal dusk. One church starts using old whale oil lanterns instead. The fumes are awful. No one complains. Even funerals change. Candlelit vigils are shortened. Some families opt for mourning burials, citing liturgical symbolism. But really, it's about saving on wax. One widow brings her own candles to the cemetery. They're pink. No one says a word. You pause by a bridge, watching the river ice crack slowly beneath the weight of spring's return. Across the water, candles glimmer in upper windows. Less than before. Just 1 per household? Maybe 2, but the light is still there. Taxed, trimmed, counted. Still there. The village you're in tonight has no name. Or perhaps it does. But no one uses it. It's the kind of place that doesn't make it onto maps, unless the cartographer sneezes in the right direction. A collection of weather-beaten wooden homes tucked between a fir forest and a half-frozen stream, where the tallest structure is the church spire, and the loudest sound is snow falling off a roof. It's here you begin to see what the candle tax really means, not on the ledgers, but in the rhythms of daily life. Or rather, nightly life. You step into a modest home, where a grandmother, mother, and daughter all share a spinning room. They take turns at the wheel, pulling flax into thread, the soft whir the only sound besides the creak of the floorboards. In the center, A candle burns slowly, propped in a clay dish. The flame dances gently on their faces, illuminating the story being told. Something about a boy who stole a goose, but the goose turned out to be magical and deeply vindictive. The story ends. The candle does not, but the grandmother snuffs it out anyway, mid-glow. "It's enough for one evening," she says. "We'll finish tomorrow, if the weather holds." You linger there in the dark with them, listening to the silence settle like fresh snow. Elsewhere in town, things are quieter still. You visit a one-room cottage occupied by a blacksmith and his brother. They sit across from each other at a low table, eating salted turnips in near total darkness. There's a candle stub between them, but it isn't lit. "Saving it," the brother grunts, as if you asked. "We use it to check wounds." You pass a midwife's home. She has 3 candles in her window. A signal, maybe, or a leftover superstition. Inside, she's mixing herbs, muttering to herself about people giving birth at the most inconvenient times. "Always at night," she says, "when candles are taxed and patience is short." That's the truth of it, isn't it? No one's furious. No one's staging marches or writing angry pamphlets in the dark. But the tax hangs in the air like the smell of spent wax. Faint, clinging, a quiet presence in every decision. Do we light the candle, or do we wait? Is this moment worth it? In the tavern, things are slightly livelier. Slightly. There's a single beeswax candle burning near the bar, and patrons lean toward it like plants chasing sunlight. The barkeep counts every drop of wax that melts, and douses it the moment business slows. "Used to light 3 of them, he says, drying a mug. "Back when we had more songs than debts." One patron lifts his cup and says, "To candlelight, taxed but faithful." A few chuckle. One man sighs. Another mutters, "It'll be the air next." But even here, the rebellion is a slow exhale, not a raised fist. Outside, the snow is beginning again. Thin, glittering flakes that catch the candlelight leaking from shuttered windows. You walk past house after house, where rooms glow faintly, the flames carefully shielded, carefully counted. You pause beside a window, watching a young boy finish copying a page of scripture. His mother leans over his shoulder, squinting in the half-light. "That's enough," she says, blowing out the candle. The boy protests. "I can still see." But the mother gently taps the page. "The tax doesn't care if you can see. It only cares how long we paid to let you try." Across the way, an old man with shaking hands tries to light his candle with a sparkstone. It takes several tries, and by the time the wick catches, he looks more relieved than triumphant. He uses the candle to find his slippers, then sits down and stares at the flame like it's an old friend who hasn't visited in years. In wealthier towns, where people can afford to be more philosophical, the candle tax sparks a wave of reflection. One clergyman pens a sermon titled, "The Light That Costs Us," a long-winded meditation on humility, darkness, and the sacredness of shared burdens. His congregation listens politely, and then promptly returns to rationing their candles the same as before. Meanwhile, a local teacher begins an odd little project. She starts measuring her evenings in candle lengths. 1 candle, 1 chapter read, 2 letters written, or 1 full evening of tutoring for a neighbor's child. "More useful than hours," she says with a shrug. "Candles don't lie." You pass through a street where every house has exactly 1 candle lit. It feels coordinated, though no one planned it. Like a city breathing in sync, 1 flicker at a time. Even weddings have changed. Instead of elaborate candle-lit banquets, couples now get married in the afternoon. The candles are saved for the meal or the first dance, or just the moment the cake is cut, and someone says something sentimental about glowing love, and everyone groans affectionately. One bride you meet says, "I don't mind. The day is still ours. Besides, candlelight hides the soup stains on the dress. And yes, there are still cheats. One clever man creates a series of oil candles from congealed fish grease and a length of linen. They smell awful, but he insists they're untaxed. "These are not candles," he explains, dramatically waving a smoked herring. "They are repurposed luminants." The taxman doesn't even bother arguing. A small coastal village, rich in cod but poor in cash, tries a different tactic entirely. They arrange a light-sharing plan. Families stagger their candle usage, and those with leftover stubs trade them like currency. One boy becomes briefly famous for inventing a double-wick system that technically counts as one candle, but burns as brightly as two. It's declared a noble attempt at fraud, and no further action is taken. And so it goes. Life flickering gently along, one taxed candle at a time. No revolutions, no riots. Just a nation learning, slowly and quietly, how to live with a little less light. You find yourself walking through a narrow lane, paved with ice-crusted cobblestones, your boots crunching softly in the dim hush of late afternoon. The sun is a faint coin behind gray clouds, and you can already feel the hour slipping. Soon, it'll be dark. Soon, candles will bloom across the windows of Sweden again, one taxed flicker at a time. Inside a modest home just off the lane, a woman is making candles. Not for sale, not for ceremony, just for her family. You settle quietly beside her as she dips a string into a pot of melted tallow, pulls it out with a practiced flick, then hangs it across a wooden rack. She repeats the motion, slow and rhythmic, each candle forming layer by layer. Candle making, you realize, has become something more than a chore. It's a quiet protest, a reclaiming of agency. If you must be taxed for light, you might as well make it with your own hands. Across Sweden, this home production has grown. People who once bought their candles from guilds now return to the old ways, boiling animal fat, rendering beeswax if they can afford it, using makeshift molds carved from wood or clay, or even hollowed-out horns. In some houses, candle making is a monthly ritual, like bread baking or mending socks. One child tells you proudly, "I made this one." He holds up a crooked, lumpy candle that looks like it's already halfway melted. "It smells like stew," he adds, as if this were a feature. In a larger town, you visit a widow named Agneta, who's become something of a local legend. She makes candles from everything: goose fat, butter scraps, leftover soap, even hardened milk. Her neighbors call her the Light Witch, though always with affection. Her home smells like a stew of centuries, and you have to admire her ingenuity. She shows you a special batch she's made from birch tar and sheep grease. "They burn dirty," she warns, "but they're stubborn, like me." Historians later note that this era of home candle production leads to a flourishing of minor regional recipes, hundreds of small, hyper-local lighting traditions that never appear in official records. Candle culture, you might say, gets weird. You pass through another town where households have developed their own signature scents. One prefers rosemary-infused tallow. Another swears by garlic wax, claiming it keeps mice away. A third simply says, "Ours smell like lard because that's what we have." A few entrepreneurial types start selling scented candle experiences to wealthier customers, complete with decorative holders made from whalebone or reindeer antler. They call it Norskenljus, northern lights in a jar. It's both beautiful and utterly unnecessary. Not that the government minds. The tax still applies. Even homemade candles must be declared in the quarterly ledger. Of course, enforcement is tricky. Few tax collectors are eager to wade through cauldrons of boiling fat to count your lumps of wax. Some simply take your word for it. One clever village sets up a candle fair where everyone brings their wares for mutual display and, unofficially, to average their numbers. The taxman is invited to taste the mulled wine, while the villagers perform candle-counting theater. "Yes, this is our whole stash," they chorus with suspicious harmony. "Please enjoy a goat pie." There's humor in it, a kind of absurd Scandinavian stoicism that turns bureaucracy into bedtime ritual. One young couple paints faces on their homemade candles and gives them names. "This is Lars. He lasted 4 nights. We miss him dearly." A school teacher writes a counting rhyme for children. "One for mother, one for bed, one for where the Bibles read. Light them slow, snuff them fast. Make the taxed candle last. It catches on." Children recite it while helping trim wicks or scrape wax drippings from last week's candelabra. In homes with many kids, it becomes a sort of sleepy lullaby. Candle care becomes an art. Wicks are trimmed with obsessive precision. Drippings are collected and remelted into ghost candles, small pale nubs that haunt the edges of the dinner table. Burn schedules are recorded in the margins of cookbooks. Lit at dinner, 22 minutes. Save 4 drips. One family you visit keeps a logbook titled The Illuminary Record. Inside are entries like, "Lit 1/12/1759, burned poorly, smelled of onions. Relit 1/13, used for mending. Mother sneezed twice. Officially done 1/14, wick too short to resurrect." Even in wealthier households, the candle tax has left its mark. In one manner, you notice the grand chandelier has half its sconces empty. "Fashion," the host insists. "Minimalism." But the servant's log says otherwise. Only 10 taxed units permitted per event. The kitchens, meanwhile, glow with untaxed light from open hearths and glowing coals. Some clever cooks place polished pans behind flames to reflect the light, creating makeshift sconces out of cookware. One maid jokes, "Dinner is better when you can see it." Slightly. Historians still debate whether the rise of home candlemaking had any real economic impact. Some claim it undermined the guilds. Others believe it strengthened community ties, as people began trading recipes and supplies like herbalists in a smoky bazaar. One scholar dryly notes that this period represents a significant uptick in burnt fingers and creative swearing. In truth, it's likely a bit of both, but what's undeniable is that light, once bought and sold like any other good, has become personal again. Handmade, imperfect, unregulated at the edges, and yet still taxed. You end your night in a tiny shed behind a farmhouse, where a boy and his grandfather sit hunched over a vat of melting wax. The boy holds a string over the pot, dipping it carefully while the old man tells stories of winters past. "Used to be we lit 4 candles every Christmas Eve," he says. "Now it's 1, but the stories stayed the same." You watch the boy lift his dripping string from the pot. A new candle is born. The old man grins. "Don't tell the tax man," he whispers, "but this one's for the cat." You wake, if one can say such a thing in a land where dawn feels like an accidental flicker of gray, and step into a cottage where the kettle rattles on a hearth and an entire family is seated around a single stubby candle. The flame wobbles slightly, as if startled to still be alive. The room is silent except for the clinking of wooden spoons against bowls. You sit with them, watching as they finish breakfast by waxlight. The father leans forward and says, "Time to extinguish it, I think." His youngest daughter nods solemnly and cups her hand around the flame, blowing gently as if kissing it goodbye. The room dims, but no one protests. That candle's shift is done. Across the countryside, such moments unfold again and again, in quiet houses where wax has become both a necessity and a symbol. You don't just burn a candle now. You consider it. You measure its life. You weigh it against the moment. And moments, it turns out, are getting creative. In one coastal town, a group of school children has invented a game called Candle King. Each evening, their families gather in a shared barn space, where one candle is lit in the center. The children take turns reading aloud. Tales of Vikings, poems about wolves, riddles that make little sense but cause great delight. Whoever finishes reading just before the candle dies is crowned the Candle King, or Queen, or Goat, depending on their mood. Their parents watch from the sides, sipping hot juniper tea and pretending not to cry when someone wins with a story about a brave little flame that just didn't want to go out. Elsewhere, a group of musicians forms an ensemble called Skugor och Ljus, Shadows and Light. They perform slow, haunting melodies by candlelight in barns, churches, and even frozen courtyards. Admission is by donation, and part of the funds go to purchasing communal candles for the elderly. Each performance ends with the same line, whispered just as the last candle flickers out. Thank you for sharing your light with us. Even in prisons, the candle tax finds its way. In a small jailhouse on the outskirts of Kalmar, inmates are issued 1 candle per week. They choose carefully when to use it. Some save it for writing, others for prayers. One man burns his all at once just to bask in brightness for 15 uninterrupted minutes. Felt like a feast, he later says. For the eyes, the guards don't interfere. They, too, are allotted candles. One lights his only candle during the midnight shift and carves silhouettes into the walls. Deer, birds, the outline of a tall woman holding a lantern. She's my wife, he says, but I make her taller here because dreams should stretch. You drift into a small church next. The pews are worn smooth, the floor dusted with pine needles tracked in from outside. A candle burns near the altar, guarded by a brass windscreen and a stern deacon who logs every inch of consumed wax in a ledger thicker than a winter quilt. Behind him, a young acolyte sweeps the aisles and hums a hymn that never quite resolves. She tells you they only light the altar candle on holy days now, and even then, just for half the service. We turn the congregation to face the windows instead. Let the sun do the preaching. In a larger town, an inventor named Eric is creating what he calls a sun tube, a ridiculous contraption made of polished tin and curved glass that reflects daylight down into his parlor. The candle tax can't touch photons, he says proudly, as if this were a revolutionary act. His neighbors come by to squint at the contraption and nod as if it makes sense. One whispers, "We just sit closer to the window, but let him have his joy." Historians still puzzle over how seriously such inventions were taken. Some call the sun tube a visionary precursor to modern light funnels. Others say it's an example of classic Swedish sarcasm taken too far. Eric, it should be noted, later files a request for a light tax credit based on his reduced wax usage. It is denied. Meanwhile, in a small village surrounded by dense pine forest, the townsfolk have declared candle-free Wednesdays. On those nights, everyone simply agrees to go to bed early, or gather around fireplaces, or tell stories in the dark. We sleep more, one woman tells you. We dream better, and we save 1/7 of our tax. There's something beautiful about it. Intentional darkness, chosen shadows, a whole community leaning into the quiet. Of course, there are those who grumble. A tailor in Västerås complains that the dim light ruins his stitches. People don't see the crooked seams till it's too late, he mutters. I'm becoming accidentally abstract. A group of university students writes a short satirical play titled The Trial of the Candle, in which a waxy defendant is accused of seducing citizens into tax fraud by flickering too temptingly. It includes a scene where the candle calls a lantern as a witness, and the lantern dramatically recites, "I am but glass and flame, judge me not." Tickets sell out in a day. The king's advisors ignore it. The candle tax remains. Still, there's something strange happening. For all its inconvenience, the candle tax is creating culture, rituals, routines, tiny traditions built around light and its limits. People marking time not by clocks, but by burns. Calendars that include candle reckoning days, where households pool their savings and buy wax together, like a festival. One village carves a giant wooden candle each winter and sets it in the town square. It doesn't burn, but every evening, someone takes a turn pretending to light it, while the children cheer. They call it the candle that couldn't be taxed. No one remembers who carved it. Everyone says it was already there. You end the evening in a cottage on the edge of a fjord, where a grandmother sits in a rocking chair, surrounded by sleeping grandchildren. One candle burns beside her, and she's reading aloud from memory. Her voice is soft, slow, seasoned by winters and worry. And so the fox said, "I will trade you one secret for one flame, but once the candle is gone, you must never ask again." The candle gutters low. She smiles and says, "That's the end for tonight. We've paid enough for wonder." The wind is picking up now, whistling through the narrow valleys and across the rooftops like a half-remembered song. You drift from the coast inland again, following the faint glow of taxed flames in distant windows. It's strange how comforting the sight has become. These soft, regulated lights holding back the dark. Not defiant, exactly, just steady. You arrive in a town known mainly for its cheese and its extraordinary stubbornness. People here have long memories, longer grudges, and an intense dislike of change. Which is why, despite the candle tax, they refuse to alter their nightly routines. They still light 3 candles at dinner. They still host weekly poetry readings by full illumination. They still allow the baker to keep candles burning while he kneads, arguing that a well-lit loaf is a righteous loaf. Technically, they pay the tax. They just resent every ore of it. The mayor, a wiry man named Pear, with a beard that looks like it grew out of sheer indignation, has created an elaborate candle budgeting plan for the entire town. Each household is assigned a quota, and any unused candle time can be donated to the communal pool. So far, this has allowed the tavern to remain open every Friday, the school to host reading hour by real flame, and the town hall to glow warmly during debates about pig theft and snow removal. Purr shows you the ledger proudly. "See here? We're under the crown's requirements, but we still burn like we mean it." One family opts out entirely. They spend every evening gathered around a glowing iron stove, telling stories in the dark. "Candles are for people who want to see things," the mother says. "We prefer to imagine." Another family has taken the opposite approach. They keep a single candle burning in each room, but shorten the wicks to a half-inch, limiting brightness and burn time. "They last longer," the father insists, "like stretching stew with extra potatoes." Historians later refer to this as the Swedish wick revolution, although no one at the time thought of it that dramatically. One scholar suggests it marked a psychological shift from passive consumption of light to active stewardship. You walk through a home where the candles are all blue. Not naturally, but dyed with crushed berries. The owner, a retired midwife named Britta, says she likes the color because it reminds her of twilight. "If we have to pay for light," she says, "let it at least look like the sky." Another home uses candles shaped like animals: goats, bears, foxes. "The kids don't cry when we snuff them," their mother explains. "They say the goat is going to bed." You sit beside a carpenter sanding wood by the dim glow of a wax nub. He works slowly, unbothered by the shadows. "You don't need much light," he says, "once your hands remember what they're doing." In his workshop, there's a small shrine to used-up candles, stumps of wax lined neatly on a shelf, each with a name and date. One reads, "Sven, burned 13 evenings, saw us through the thunderstorm." Another simply says, "Maria, birthday cake." It's not grief exactly, but it is memory. You move next into the home of a seamstress who's developed her own system for measuring candle efficiency. She records the number of stitches sewn per flame inch. "I'm at 12, she says proudly, trying for 15. You ask how she handles mistakes in the dark. She shrugs. Dark thread on dark cloth. If it holds, it's fine. Her daughter, meanwhile, paints by candlelight. She's creating a series of tiny portraits. Candle 1, before dinner. Candle 2, post-storm. Candle 3, my brother crying, pretending it's about the onion. Not all is quaint. In a border village, a tax inspector finds a hidden stockpile, over 300 candles, stashed in a false floor beneath a bakery. The baker insists they're for a future wedding. The inspector, unusually sentimental that day, pretends not to hear him correctly and records candle surplus intended for ceremonial use. They part ways awkwardly, but with mutual respect. In another household, a clever teenager creates a candle map of their home. A chart indicating the best places to sit for optimal light at various times. She invites friends over to chase the flame, and it becomes a kind of game. Who needs cards when you've got geometry and oppression? She laughs. Historians still argue whether the candle tax stifled creativity or nurtured it. One camp says it dimmed innovation, forcing people into tighter routines. Another claims it sparked an explosion of subtle artistry, measured joy, ritualized shadow, light as a conscious act. You sit beside an old man playing a fiddle in a half-lit room. The tune is slow, winding. He says it's a song meant to match the burn of a standard tallow taper. Takes 10 minutes if I play it right, 12 if I miss a note. When he finishes, he snuffs the candle and says, "We used to light without thinking. Now we think without lighting." He grins. "And isn't that something?" You nod and follow the sound of another candle burning somewhere down the street. It's not loud, but you know it's there. You can feel it, the faint warmth, the presence of flame in a world learning to live on less of it. The sky is slate and unbothered, heavy with unshed snow. You're back in the countryside now, in a hamlet so small that its church bell doubles as the town crier. Word of weather, harvests, and taxes all ring out from the same rusted clapper. Tonight, the bell stays silent. Instead, you're guided by a row of faint candlelit windows, each one barely more than a blink in the darkness. You step into a farmhouse where 3 generations sit together at a single table, playing a game they call flame catch. It's not about speed or skill. The rules are simple. Stare into the candle until someone blinks. The prize? Choosing tomorrow's dinner vegetable. The stakes are, admittedly, low, but that's the mood now. Quiet, cozy, oddly ceremonial. Every bit of candlelight is given meaning. You begin to realize that the candle tax, annoying though it is, has turned light into something more than utility. It's currency, it's memory, it's ritual. And in places like this, it's something close to sacred. At the corner of the table, the oldest member of the family, a woman with a braid longer than your attention span, is mending a sock. She does so slowly, rhythmically, with the kind of patience usually reserved for monks or pickling. The candle flickers across her thimble, casting slow gold flashes on the wool. "We used to mend by daylight," she says without looking up. "But the stories sound better at night." Next door, a boy uses his candle time to read a book of riddles. He recites them aloud in a half-whisper. What comes once in a minute, twice in a moment, and never in 1,000 years? His mother smiles, but doesn't answer. Instead, she lights a second candle and hands it to him with the solemnity of a priest. "Use it wisely," she says, "or at least use it on the chapter about manners." In the village hall, really just a large barn with ambition, a group of teenagers is hosting a candle ball. Not a dance, as it turns out, but a game involving a wooden ball, a bucket of snow, and a lot of yelling. The candle burns in the center of the room, and if it gets blown out, the game ends. It's nonsense. It's joy. It's tax-free. Up on a nearby hill, a retired naval officer has taken to tracking his candle burn times with military precision. Tallow tapers burn 20 minutes per inch in calm air, he explains, showing you charts. Factor in drafts, mood swings, and sassy dogs, and it becomes art. He's written an unofficial treatise, Wax and War, a tactical guide to domestic illumination. It has exactly 2 readers. Both are cousins. And then there's Marta. You meet her in the schoolhouse, which now doubles as the town's candle bank. She's the keeper, part librarian, part accountant, part witch if local gossip is to be believed. She records every candle brought in and taken out, labeling each with a slip of parchment, boiled 12-3, shared 12-6, stub returned 12-9. I trust them, she says, when asked why she bothers. But trust likes a little paperwork just to feel secure. The town's candle stockpile is stored in an old grain chest, repurposed with love. There's a logbook, sorted by category. Long burns, short bursts, aromatic, ceremonial, rainy day reserve, and the ever-popular odds and ends drawer. That one smells like someone tried to perfume a barn. Marta also maintains what she calls the borrow box, candles donated by households doing well, lent to those struggling. Light debt, she calls it, usually repaid in soup or riddles. No one seems to mind. In fact, the borrow box has become something of a communal confessional. Some people return candles with notes. Sorry I burned this one early, needed to cry in private. Others leave small gifts, a dried apple slice, a pine cone carved into a cat, a drawing of the sun with the words, "Someday again." Historians still debate whether these small, homegrown exchanges counted as tax evasion. One scholar argues they represented a form of micro-redistribution. Another says, honestly, it's just candles. But the Crown doesn't crack down, perhaps because it's too far. Perhaps because the system works in its strange, sleepy way. Or perhaps because someone in power once borrowed a candle and forgot to return it, and doesn't want to bring it up now. You stop by the church, which tonight hosts Glow Hour, a weekly gathering where families bring their lowest quality candles to burn together. Some sputter, some smell like cabbage, some lean so badly they need to be propped up by pebbles. But no one minds. They sing hymns and folk songs, and even a few lullabies. None of them in tune, all of them in harmony. At the end, each family receives a candle stub and a blessing. May your flame last the storm, and your wax find good company. The blessing isn't official, but it sticks in your mind. You end the evening in a home where 2 sisters, one 7 and the other 17, are re-dipping candles. The younger one asks if she can make hers pink. The older one says no, they don't have anything pink. And also that's not how tallow works. The younger one sighs and mutters, "Then I'll just pretend it's pink." And she does. She holds it up, still soft, still cooling, and declares it the best pink candle in all of Sweden. A slow fog has rolled in, wrapping the landscape like a blanket left out to catch the chill. The trees look like brush strokes now, soft, half-finished, fading at the edges. You follow the familiar orange glints in the windows, the candlelight that never quite gets bright enough to show you the way, but refuses to go out. It's the sort of light that trusts you'll find your footing eventually. In this village, word has gotten around that you're the one who listens. So tonight, the stories come to you. You're seated in a wood-paneled room with creaky floors and walls lined with books that smell like mildew and mystery. The host, a librarian named Johan, is pouring tea with exactly the same attention you might give a confession. He sets a candle on the table, beeswax, pleasantly misshapen, and lets the silence breathe for a few seconds before speaking. Did I tell you about the man who trained his cat to extinguish candles on command? He asks. You haven't heard this one. He said it saved wax, but the cat got ambitious, started blowing out candles in church, at the market, mid-proposal once. You ask what happened to the cat. Johann shrugs. Got hired by the tax office. He grins. So do you. A few minutes later, a woman named Elna joins the table. She brings candied nuts and a candle that smells vaguely of burnt bread. Don't ask, she says. It's a long story involving a loaf, a pigeon, and my cousin who thinks he's an inventor. She tells you about her neighbor, who keeps his candles hidden in old violin cases. Another swears by using candle soot as eyeliner. If I'm being taxed for it, I might as well get pretty. Elna has turned her candle rations into a form of matchmaking. She calls it shared burn. Each eligible person in the village gets one evening with a partner and a single taper. If they make it to the stub without snuffing the flame or starting a fire, they get a second candle. So far, 2 engagements, 3 awkward breakups, and 1 highly confusing friendship involving a shared goat. There's a pause in the storytelling while Johann trims the wick on the beeswax candle. It's a delicate operation, requiring the same concentration you'd expect from a surgeon or a tailor threading a particularly stubborn needle. He sets the trimmings aside in a little bowl labeled Future Lights. Nothing gets wasted anymore. In fact, nothing about candle use feels casual. You visit a weaver who keeps a candle-lit diary. Not about her thoughts, but about the candles themselves. Each entry is a poetic little log. Wick curled, flame danced. Lit during thunder, no fear. Snuffed with a sneeze. Used while mending Uncle's coat. Smelled of onions and old plans. Still better than nothing. She reads them aloud to her children before bed, then lets them draw what the flame looked like that day. Her youngest insists every candle is secretly a bird in disguise. That's why the smoke always flies up. In another cottage, a young couple has created wax portraits. They melt old stubs into molds shaped like their faces, slightly exaggerated. The results are uncanny and a little unnerving. We keep them on the mantle, they say. Reminds us who we were when the tax began. You ask if the portraits are ever lit. Only during arguments, one admits. We call it melting the ego. Historians still argue whether the candle tax pushed Swedish citizens toward absurdism or simply revealed what had always been there, a talent for quiet rebellion through art, humor, and slow-burn sarcasm. You come upon a man sculpting animals from hardened drippings. His table is a wax menagerie. Lopsided moose, snoozing dogs, one strangely accusatory owl. They're all made from the same candle, he says. I burned it during my mother's last winter. Couldn't throw away the leftovers. Figured I'd turn memory into something that stares back. He chuckles, then adds, Don't tell the owl I said that. Further down the road, a former soldier shows you his combat candles, half-used stubs he carried during patrols. He lights one for you now, watching the flame tremble. This one, he says, I used to mark letters, wrote to a girl, never sent them. You ask if he still has the letters. He shakes his head. Burned them. Used the last candle to do it. In the corner of the room, a small child sleeps in a chair, curled like a cat. A single candle burns near her, held in a jar painted with stars. Her mother made it with crushed charcoal and elderberry juice. The light inside flickers gently, turning the ceiling into a soft, shifting galaxy. When asked why she does it, the mother shrugs. Can't afford stars. This will do. Back in town, a carpenter tells you about his candle-fueled calendar. Each day, he lights a fresh stub at the same hour and carves a mark on the wall when it's done. Winter's slower this way, he says. Feels more like a story, less like a sentence. And then there's the innkeeper, who hosts a wax wake every time one of his candles burns to the base. We gather, we say a few words, we toast the flame, then we stomp it out together. The toasts are ridiculous. To the candle that saw me cry over salted porridge, to the flame that made my neighbor seem handsome, to the stub that taught me brevity and poetry. It's all silly and deeply serious, as all the best traditions are. You end your night in a shed with a leaky roof, sitting beside a boy who's building a candle boat. A tiny wax sailboat meant to float down the stream behind his house. "It's for my grandma," he whispers. "She said light finds its way." You ask if it will. He looks up at you, eyes bright with both wax and wonder. "It already does." The stream gurgles softly under a thin layer of frost, like it's whispering secrets it learned from the clouds. You walk along its bank as the boy's candle boat drifts off behind you, its single flame wobbling bravely against the cold air. It doesn't last long, that flame. But somehow it's enough. A floating speck of warmth in a world still half asleep. As you move back toward the heart of the village, a new sound greets you. Quiet laughter, muffled through heavy shutters. You peek inside a modest tavern, where half a dozen villagers sit clustered around a table lit by 4 dangerously short candles. They're playing a game called Tax or Tail. The rules are simple. You either confess how you dodged the candle tax that week, or you invent a story so charming no one minds that it's made up. A wiry man with cheeks like old apples leans in and declares, "I lit a candle using only the sun's reflection off my wife's brooch. Technically free." Everyone nods solemnly, as if he's just rewritten the law of physics. The next player, a stooped woman with fingers stained by ink, says, "I wrote a fake letter to the tax man. Told him I was allergic to wax. He sent back a candle made of salt. I've been seasoning stews with it ever since." They cackle with delight. You linger there, soaking in the glow. Not just the literal glow from the candles, but that invisible one that comes from shared nonsense. From stories too ridiculous not to be true, and too gentle to be punished. Later that night, you visit a small barn just outside of town. A group of children is preparing for what they call the Wax Parade. A procession of candle holders fashioned from anything but actual candle holders. One girl has hollowed out a turnip. Another has made hers from an old teacup glued to a sock. One boy arrives dragging a sled with a candle stuck in a fish skull. "He's called Sir Burnsalot," he says proudly. The parents supervise from a distance, drinking warm lingonberry punch and pretending not to be worried about the open flames and the presence of sleds. The parade begins with a chant. "Left foot, right foot, follow the wax. We'll march till the flame takes naps." It's off-key, it's perfect. The parade wins its way through the snowy paths between homes, past shuttered windows and crooked fences. At one house, an old man steps outside in his nightshirt and bows gravely as the children pass. "I was once a candle too," he says, before being pulled gently back inside by someone who clearly loves him. Further into the evening, you're invited into the home of a retired tax collector. You're hesitant at first, expecting something stiff or apologetic, but the man surprises you. His walls are lined with candle stubs. His shelves are stacked with logs. Not the wood kind, but the writing kind. "I started recording candle conversations," he explains. "Candle conversations?" He gestures to a thick journal. "The things people said when I came to collect. Some were mad, some were clever, but most just wanted to be heard." He flips to a page and reads aloud. "Sir, this candle burns for my father. If you tax it, then you tax my grief." He pauses. "I didn't write a fee that day." He shows you another. "This light is for sewing baby clothes. I've already lost one child to the cold. Don't ask me to risk another." He closes the book. You don't forget those ones. There's silence after that. Only the sound of the flame beside him, flickering as if moved by memory. You ask why he keeps collecting. "I don't," he says. "Now I just listen. Sometimes to the flame, sometimes to people. It's not so different." Outside again, the wind has picked up. You duck into the home of a family you've met before. The candle calendar carpenter, his poetic wife, and their daughter who draws birds into every candle's smoke. Tonight, they're experimenting with drip readings, a kind of fortune-telling where the way wax falls into cold water is interpreted like tea leaves. The daughter holds a candle above a basin and lets it drip. The wax cools instantly, forming wild, lacy shapes. "That one's a horse," she says. "Means we'll have a surprise." Her father peers over. "Looks like spilled porridge to me." They laugh, and the mother records the result anyway. January 14th, horse or porridge, possible visitor. Historians still debate whether any of this had lasting meaning. One academic called it wax-based folk divination with zero predictive value. Another wrote an entire thesis suggesting that these customs were Sweden's response to an era of soft oppression. Resistance not with fire, but with flickers. A wandering peddler passes through town around midnight. He carries a bundle of stubs traded from other villages, wrapped in cloth and smelling faintly of cinnamon and soot. He sells them not by size or quality, but by story. "This one," he says, handing you a warped beeswax twist, "was burned during a confession. This one watched a man build a rocking chair without plans. And this one was used to write a love letter never sent. Still smells like ink and cowardice." You buy 3. He thanks you with a bow and disappears into the snow, his lantern swinging like a secret. Back in town, you see that several homes have placed candle stubs in their windows, too short to be taxed, too brief to matter, but still present. It's like a Morse code of resilience, a tiny rebellion against darkness, a soft, "I'm here." You pause at a window where a child has drawn stars around the candle with charcoal. The stars are crooked, overlapping, some with 6 points, some with 11. It's chaotic and perfect. Inside, the flame flickers once, twice, then holds steady. By now, the world feels stitched together by candlelight. Every window glows like the ember of a forgotten thought. Even the frost seems to shimmer more softly, as if afraid to extinguish the small warmth blooming behind every shutter. You find yourself on the outskirts of the village again, where the forest begins to reassert itself, thick with pine and mystery. Here, in a mossy clearing, stands a cottage that doesn't quite belong. Too crooked, too quiet, too careful. You're drawn in not by light, but by the absence of it. Inside, the air is warm and thick with the scent of herbs and melting wax. A woman, perhaps 70, perhaps 300, motions for you to sit. She doesn't offer her name, only gestures to the walls. Every surface is covered in candle molds, strange shapes, spirals, fish, birds with too many wings, something that looks suspiciously like a tax inspector mid-sneeze. "I make dream candles," she says. You wait for her to explain. "They're not for light, not really. They're for sleeping near. You burn them low, just a stub, just enough to soften the edges of your thoughts. They smell like things you've forgotten." She hands you one shaped like a mushroom and murmurs, "For when you miss someone, but don't want to cry about it." She's not taxed, she says. "No one taxes dreams." Then she laughs. Yet, from there, you drift to a cluster of homes where a different kind of ritual is underway. The candle trade. Every Tuesday, families swap candles. Not for size or burn time, but for scent. One has a batch infused with dried orange peel. Another, cedar shavings. Someone claims theirs smells like clean laundry, though you suspect that's mostly imagination. They meet in the village square, which has been cleared of snow except for a patch in the center where children build waxy snowmen from discarded candle stubs. The results are haunting. One snowman appears to be mid-scream. Another is clearly wearing someone's old spectacles. Each family lays out their candles on little cloths, and trades commence. But it's never competitive. The currency here is not greed, but curiosity. One man sniffs a lemon-scented stub and sighs. "Smells like my grandmother's cellar." He immediately offers 2 pine-scented tapers and a candle shaped like a boot. Someone has brought a candle that crackles faintly as it burns. Infused, they say, with dried birch bark. "Sounds like a tiny fireplace," they explain. Perfect for people who can't afford actual fires. You watch as a woman holds a particularly lovely candle to her chest and says, "This one's not for tonight. This one's for when the storm comes, not if, when." In the background, a few villagers stand around a map tacked to a barrel lid. They're charting how far different candle styles have traveled across the region. It looks like chaos, but there's method in it. Symbols for scent, color, mold shape, even wick material. It's the candle equivalent of a family tree, and apparently the red-dyed chili wax variety has somehow reached Finland. Historians later refer to this informal system as the lusvägar, or light routes, a folk version of trade, untouched by coin, entirely built on memory and mood. One scholar calls it emotional barter. Another suggests it was simply what people did when given too many rules. You leave the trading square and walk with a young couple who've just exchanged a stub for a candle, said to have been burned at a wedding. They light it together in the snow and stand in silence. You don't ask if they're in love. Some things glow better when left unspoken. Further into the woods, in a snow-covered cabin near a frozen lake, lives a man named Lasse, who claims to be writing the definitive candle epic. He says it's a poem, a song, a recipe, and a political statement all at once. He offers you a verse: 1 inch for sorrow, 2 for sleep, 3 to light the truths we keep, burn to learn, drip to dream, wax is quiet but never mean. You ask how long he's been writing it. Since the tax, he says. Or maybe before, hard to tell. He burns his candles in a circle around him as he writes, each one corresponding to a different stanza. If the poem flows, I relight the same one next time. If it doesn't, I melt it down. Bad wax makes bad rhymes. Is he taxed? Of course, but he keeps a separate journal for his tax candles, the ones used for declarations, ledgers, compliance. He doesn't write poetry under those. The night deepens, and you find yourself back in the heart of the village again, where a small crowd has gathered in the main square for the silent burn. No one speaks. Each person holds a candle, none more than 3 fingers tall. The flames dance in the still air, reflected in dozens of quiet eyes. No music, no speeches, just the shared sound of burning. When a candle gutters out, that person quietly leaves. The square thins slowly, naturally, like petals falling. No goodbyes. One child's candle goes out too soon, and a stranger silently hands them theirs. The child whispers, "Thank you." But the stranger has already turned to leave. You stay until the last flame fades. Afterward, a woman sweeps the square with a handmade broom. She hums a lullaby. You recognize it, maybe? Or maybe it's just one of those melodies that lives in your bones, even if you've never heard it. She passes you a small stub, half-burned, faintly violet-scented. "Light this when you've forgotten why we bother," she says, "and it'll remind you." You tuck it in your pocket and walk into the dark, carrying just enough glow to see one more step ahead. It's early now, that deep part of night that doesn't quite belong to yesterday or tomorrow. The world seems paused. The snow has softened underfoot, muffling your steps like the ground itself has pulled a quilt over its head. The sky is a velvet dome, starless but still somehow lit, maybe by all the candles still burning behind curtains, small worlds glowing in quiet defiance of silence and tax. You find yourself at the threshold of a building unlike the others, a workshop with a carved sign reading Bröderna Ljus. The Brothers Light. It's part joke, part truth. Inside, twin brothers, Elias and Emil, have turned candle crafting into an art so precise it makes you feel like you've wandered into a science experiment disguised as a bedtime story. Elias greets you with wax-stained hands and a grin. "We don't make candles," he says. "We make moods." Their shelves are lined with rows of labeled tapers and pillars, none longer than a pencil, each labeled not by scent or color, but by occasion. for arguments that end well, for eating soup while it rains, for pretending you're not crying, for sewing buttons at midnight. Emile explains their system while pouring wax into a fox-shaped mold. We experiment with burn rate, shape, draft resistance. This one should last the exact length of an apology that almost works. You ask if they ever make candles for joy. Elias nods and pulls down a short, squat candle with a cheerful curve. We call this one the Ha candle. It's meant to burn while telling stories you've exaggerated just enough. They sell their creations on a pay what you can unless you're annoying basis. The tax collectors leave them alone. They're confused by us, Emile says proudly. They come in, look around, then say something about unquantifiable waxwork, and back out slowly. In the corner of the shop is a small candle museum. Not grand, just a cabinet full of oddities. The stub used to light the very first tax notice in town. A melted candle shaped like Sweden that someone claimed melted into Denmark after a hot day. A triple wick experiment gone wrong, labeled simply too ambitious. They even have a tax day candle, a chunk of pure tallow that no one has dared light. It's cursed, Elias says, mostly joking. Every time someone tries, their soup burns or they stub a toe. Historians still debate whether the brothers' shop was protest, performance art, or just a side effect of too much wax and not enough supervision. One academic claims their inventory is an emotional archive of rural resistance. Another simply calls it delightful nonsense. You leave the shop with a candle labeled for long walks with unexpected thoughts. It seems appropriate. Outside, the snow has thickened. The houses look like cakes dusted with icing. You wander into a house where a woman is hosting a candle storytelling night. But the twist is, you can't see the storyteller. She sits behind a curtain. All you see is the candle she burns while speaking. The idea, she explains, is to let the story live in the light, not the face. Tonight's tale is about a man who lost his shadow during a snowstorm and had to train a goat to find it again. The candle flickers, casting goat-shaped shadows on the curtain. Whether they're on purpose or just tricks of wax, no one knows. No one asks. It's better that way. Afterward, a man in the audience leans over and says, I once heard a story told by a candle that burned backward, but I think I was just very tired. Another woman says, my cousin swears by silent wicks. Supposedly they don't flicker, they just glow. Very smugly. You smile. Everyone here is a little tired, a little dreamy, a little enchanted by things no sensible person should take seriously. Which, of course, is the whole point. Later that night, or maybe it's already morning, you visit a house where the candles are kept in bird cages. Not locked in, but displayed. It's to remind us they're free when we let them be, the owner explains. And caged when we hoard them. She's written poems to each one. Candle, brief as breath, burn not to chase the dark. Just teach it to sit quietly. The wax drips slowly through the bottom of the cage into a waiting tray, where her daughter collects it to remold into new shapes. Nothing's wasted, she says. Even the drips tell stories. Back in town, you pass a boy watching his candle's shadow move across the wall. He's timing it with a stick and some pebbles. It's a clock, he says. Sort of. You ask if it works. He nods. Tells time in feelings, not minutes. You make a note to steal that phrase for later. A shop nearby is selling candle echoes, scraps and drippings molded into rough, lumpy shapes meant to resemble how the candle felt, not how it looked. This one's called Regretful Tuesdays, the vendor says, handing you a chunk of purple and gray wax. This one's Laughing Over Soup. And this one, we're not sure. Might be a carrot, might be a metaphor. You buy it anyway. You end the section at a community board covered in candle drawings. Children and adults alike have pinned up sketches of their favorite flames. Some shaped like dragons, some like teacups. One shaped suspiciously like the king, with the caption, "This one burns weird." In the center is a large crayon drawing of a candle with the words, "We pay for the wax. We make the light ours." It's not protest. Not exactly. It's just truth, scribbled in wax and whimsy. The sun still refuses to show itself. It's that northern winter hush now, where night stretches thin over morning like the last scrap of butter across bread. You walk slowly through the village, where even the roosters seem unsure whether to crow. Most windows are dark, candles snuffed, sleep-winning for now. But a few still glow, dim as lullabies, soft as breath against glass. This morning, if you can call it that, you're heading toward the town bathhouse. A modest wooden structure near the river. It smells like birch, soap, and something faintly spicy. Inside, candles line every shelf, their flames reflecting off copper basins and foggy mirrors. It's warm here, steamy. You exhale and watch your breath dissolve like a second soul. People come here not just to bathe, but to chat, to gossip, to warm up bodies and cool off tempers, and most importantly, to light their thinking candles. "They're not for light," says a woman kneeling beside a tub. "They're for sorting out problems you'd rather not solve out loud." Today, hers is a short beeswax taper, stuck in a mug filled with coins. "It reminds me that I have enough," she says, with a smile that suggests she might be lying, but kindly so. A man sits by the stove, legs stretched out, candle balanced on one knee. "This one's my forgiveness candle," he says. "I burn it when I need to ungrumble. You ask if it works." He shrugs. "I've forgiven the same person 3 times this week. Either I'm generous or forgetful." Another woman is plucking her eyebrows by candlelight. "More honest this way," she says. "Electric bulbs lie. You learn that bathhouse candles are tax-exempt for now." "Public hygiene," the decree said. But the bathers chuckle and say it's really because the inspector didn't want to walk into a room full of naked villagers demanding a receipt. Historians still argue whether this loophole was intentional or a bureaucratic oversight. One theory suggests a clerk simply forgot to check the box for communal moisture. Another suggests that the village threatened to charge the taxman double if he showed up during steam hour. As you relax on a bench beside the stove, a boy comes in with a small stub wrapped in cloth. It's his grandmother's last candle, and he's here to relight it in her memory. "She said it still had a story left," he says, placing it gently into a carved holder shaped like a wolf. The wax melts quickly, the flame dancing as if called by name. Others bow their heads, not in sorrow, but in something quieter. Respect, maybe, or recognition. One man whispers, "Light always remembers the hand that sparked it." When you finally step outside, your skin flushed and lungs full of damp cedar air, the cold no longer bites. You carry the warmth with you. You pass the town bakery, where candles burn atop loaves of bread cooling in the window. It's not a celebration, it's inventory. The baker uses tiny wax markers, red for rye, blue for barley, yellow for whatever was left in the sack. A few candles flicker out, and she just sighs. "That one's gone rogue again." She invites you in for a slice and lights a stub she calls the crumblight, used for eating mistakes and crust ends. "Every loaf gets a story," she says, handing you a slice of something warm and mysterious. "This one's Snowstorm Panic Bake number 6. I think I used salt twice." While you eat, she tells you about the rolling flame, a local tradition where one candle is passed from house to house, each family burning it just long enough to finish one task. A letter, a chore, a moment of quiet. Then they snuff it out and pass it along. "It's not about light," she says. "It's about presence. If the candle's near, you don't rush." The candle currently lives with the cobbler, who's repairing a boot that belonged to the mayor's aunt's goat. It's unclear if the goat wore the boot or just sat in it, but the cobbler takes the repair seriously. "Everyone deserves good footwear," he says, even if they eat tin cans. He's also invented a wax polish that smells like cinnamon. Might be cursed, he admits, or just strong. Not far away, you stumble into a cottage filled with candle clocks, devices that tell time by how quickly the wax melts through sections. One clock is shaped like a house, with wax dripping through rooms labeled morning worry, midday snack, and evening regret. The woman who built it says she no longer uses sundials. Too judgmental, she claims. The sun sees everything. The candle sees what you're ready to share. She invites you to light a new one, a thin stick of green wax embedded with dried rosemary. As it burns, the aroma swirls around the room like an old story being retold. You feel calmer, a little older, maybe wiser, maybe just well-fed. On a nearby shelf is a candle that hasn't been lit yet. It's labeled, "For when I decide to forgive myself." You don't ask if she plans to burn it soon. Some lights take time. Down the road, a trio of school teachers hosts a wick workshop, where students learn the importance of wick trimming, candle safety, and emotional pacing. A sign on the wall reads, "If your candle's flaring, maybe you are too." The children make candles shaped like strange animals, sandwiches, clouds. One creates a wax figure that looks like their teacher and adds a speech bubble. Less homework, more naps. The teacher smiles. Art is protest. And also, they're not wrong. At the end of the day, you join a small group gathered under an awning near the town hall, where a candle burns beside a suggestion box. People drop in slips of paper. Some offer policy ideas. Others just write thoughts. One says, "We should have candle Olympics. Longest burn, weirdest drip, fastest melt." Another, "What if we made a candle that never ends? Or at least one that says goodbye gently?" The box will be opened once a month. Most suggestions will be ignored, misunderstood, or laughed at. But the candle still burns beside it, a silent witness to hopes that flicker more bravely in the dark. You linger a moment longer, watching wax pool in its dish, watching the shadows it casts onto the wall. One looks like a bird mid-flight, another like a hand reaching upward. You don't blink. Not yet. The village is shifting again, somewhere between waking and dreaming, like a candle on the edge of a draft. You drift now to a quieter street, where fewer footprints disturb the snow, and the windows are shuttered with thick woolen curtains. But one door is cracked open. Warmth spills through the gap, pulling you in like the scent of something nostalgic. Inside is a long, narrow room filled wall-to-wall with shelves. It's neither a shop nor a library, though it carries the spirit of both. The walls are lined with small glass bottles, each containing a candle stub, sealed and labeled with names, dates, and cryptic notes like "burned during the storm when the goose ran off," or "the laugh that turned into a sneeze." This is the Candle Archive, run by a woman named Sina, who considers herself the Flame's librarian. "I don't collect candles," she tells you gently. "I collect moments, preserved in wax." She removes a bottle labeled "Oscar and the Apricot Argument." You ask what that means, and she smiles. No one remembers. That's the beauty of it. Sina believes that once a candle's flame dies, its smoke carries away the memory, but the wax remembers what the smoke forgets. Her job, then, is to honor the leftover part, the quiet part, the part that didn't get to rise. She lets you hold one labeled "First Kiss, Second Thoughts." It's oddly heavy, or maybe that's just the weight of stories you'll never hear. You ask if she ever lights them again. "Only once," she says, "when I need to forgive myself for something I did slowly." She shows you the wall of unfiled entries. Some are misshapen, some cracked, some still carry faint scents. Lavender, bread crust, ink, grief. Each one is a candle that mattered enough to keep, but not enough to explain. That space between significance and silence? She calls it her favorite kind of mystery. Historians argue whether these wax archives were ever real. Some say it's just folklore, a myth wrapped around the practical habit of hoarding leftover bits. But one visiting scholar, in a paper footnote barely noticed, wrote, "If you sit in that room long enough, the candles start whispering. Not words exactly, but warmth. And sometimes that's more honest." You step back outside and realize the village has changed again. It always does, in small, waxy ways. On the edge of the square, a group of teenagers has gathered to perform candle theater. The premise is absurd. They reenact historical events using wax figures and no voices, just gestures, shadows, and flame. Tonight's performance? The meeting of three unimportant barons who all forgot their swords. The audience sits on logs, laughing softly as wax knights flop over or melt too soon. At one point, someone improvises a treaty using a stick of licorice as a scroll. One candle sputters dramatically and is declared a traitor flame. Applause follows. You speak to the girl who runs the troupe. She says their goal is to remind people that history wasn't always important when it happened. You ask what they're performing next. She shrugs. Something about an argument over the price of pickled herring, or possibly a love story. Sometimes it's both. Later, you come across a strange sight. A man sitting in the snow, sketching candle flames onto parchment with a charcoal stick. He's trying to capture flame personalities. He shows you a page labeled, "Nervous Flame, hops like it heard a secret. Proud Flame, tall, still, unimpressed by your drama. Lonely Flame, burns sideways, looking for someone to lean on." You ask what it means. He says, "Some people see faces in clouds. I see conversations in candles. Back in the marketplace, a woman sells candle caps, tiny hand-stitched hats you can place over a cooled stub. They get cold too," she says with complete sincerity. "And besides it's fashionable, there's one shaped like a duck, another that resembles the mayor's comb-over. One even plays a lullaby when removed. Mechanical, off-key, but oddly soothing. You choose a plain one, embroidered with a single word. Still, the woman winks. That's the most powerful state to be in. Later, in a dusty room at the top of the mill, you meet an elderly man who teaches a course called Candle Philosophy for Beginners. It's free, but you're required to bring your own candle and one burning question. Tonight's students are seated in a circle, candles lit in front of them. One woman asks, "Is it selfish to want a longer flame?" Another says, "What if my light isn't enough for someone else?" The teacher nods and sips something warm. Then he says, "The candle doesn't judge. It burns until it doesn't. And in that time, it does what it's meant to do." He gestures at his own stub, nearly gone. "Mine will finish soon. That's not a tragedy. That's design." You leave quietly, letting your question stay unasked. It's already answered, in a way. Outside, someone has begun carving candle holders into the trunks of trees, little alcoves where flames can sit like guests. The wind doesn't seem to mind them. The snow steers clear. You pass a tall pine where a candle sits in a knot in the bark. A note beneath it reads, "For the fox that passed here yesterday, you were seen." You wonder if the fox knows. You wonder if it matters. You wonder if being seen is always this gentle. The wax drips, unhurried. The flame dances, unbothered. And the world, for now, feels exactly the right size. The morning tries once more to begin, this time with a blush of lavender on the horizon. But it's shy, hesitant. Like even the sun knows it's not the main character here. The true light is still coming from the scattered candles across the village, flickering in windows, on fence posts, nestled in snow-cradled lanterns like sleeping thoughts. You pass a crooked little shed at the edge of a field. where an old man is painting wax portraits, not of people, of the candles themselves. Some deserve to be remembered, he says, daubing a bit of gold onto a stub that burned too brightly. This one exploded, took half my beard with it, but she meant well. He shows you a row of tiny portraits, each one with a name. Greta the Nervous, Björn the Tall, Stubby Margit. You notice that every painting has a soft glow, not because it's illuminated, but because the wax used in the paint retains some inner warmth. Or maybe that's just how he paints, with memory instead of light. He says, a candle lives twice, first in flame, then in story. This way, mine get both. Further into the village, you stop at a bench where an elderly couple is playing a game called Wick and Whim. The rules are unclear, involving dice, candle size, and occasional haikus shouted into the snow. You watch as the woman lights a stub and declares, "This round is for honesty," then promptly cheats. He protests, laughing. "You skipped your wick trim?" She shrugs. "Trimmed in spirit." They explain that the game was invented during the first candle tax winter, when boredom and resistance met and decided to flirt. Each round corresponds to a feeling. It's a game of chance, he says, but also of choosing which chance to take. Historians still argue whether Wick and Whim had any influence beyond the village. Some suggest it spread quietly across northern Sweden. Others claim it stayed local, like a whisper never meant to be shouted. You walk on. A group of young children is gathered in a barn, staging what they call the Wax Olympics. Events include slowest burn race, tallest flame balancing act, candle snuff relay, snuff without smoke. They crown a stub named Captain Drip as the winner after it survives being accidentally sat on, dropped in snow, and waved at a goat. A tiny crown is placed atop it. Tin foil, feathers, and confidence. You're handed a medal made of hardened wax. It smells like someone's grandmother's closet. You feel oddly honored. Afterward, you visit a home where candles are arranged by emotion rather than color or scent. The system is confusing at first. Contentment sits next to quiet longing, while spiteful hope glows in a corner by itself. The owner, a woman with a quiet voice and very expressive eyebrows, offers you a cup of tea and says, "We don't name feelings enough, so the candles do it for us." She lights one called Tired But Kind, and it fills the room with a soft citrus scent and a warmth that curls around your shoulders like a shawl. You point to a candle marked Difficult But Honest, and she nods. That one smokes, even when still. We love it anyway. Not far from her home, you discover the candle choir. Not people, actual candles, arranged in a circle, each carved to a different height and burned at varying depths. As the wind moves through, the flames respond, producing faint whistles, pops, and sighs. A young man monitors the tones with a tuning fork and says, "It's not music you can sing to, it's music that sings to you." You ask if the villagers come here to listen. He smiles. Only when they're ready to hear things they weren't expecting. Someone has posted a small sign nearby. If your thoughts are too loud, try whispering with fire instead. You linger, letting the sounds melt into you. Later, in a quiet alley, you meet an inventor tinkering with what he calls a flame translator. It's a glass orb with metal petals that open based on heat fluctuations. It turns candle flickers into movement, he explains. Eventually, I want it to write poems. You ask if it works. Not yet, he says. Right now it mostly says wobble, but that's a start. He shows you a notebook where he's cataloged flame moods alongside his machine's reactions. Candle burns low, machine opens wide. Curiosity? Maipturim. Candle flares, machine clinks. Mild panic. Candle sputters, machine shakes. Probably hungry. You suggest it might be projecting. He grins. Aren't we all? As night creeps back in. Though really, it never left. You find yourself standing near the frozen lake again. Someone has set candles out on the ice in jars. Dozens of them. They look like stars fallen gently into place, too polite to disturb the fish below. The air is crisp, your breath a soft cloud, and someone nearby plays a slow, wandering tune on a nickel harpa. It sounds like the lake remembering a lullaby. You don't ask why the candles are there. Some things don't need reasons. You simply watch them burn, reflections rippling on the smooth, dark glass of ice, until the lines between water and sky blur, and it feels, just for a moment, like the whole world is holding its breath with you. There's a hush tonight that feels deeper than silence, like even the wind has decided to listen instead of speak. The sky is streaked with faint bands of blue and gray, and the snow glows faintly, reflecting the warm flicker of candlelight that now dances from nearly every window in the village. It's not celebration, not ritual, just rhythm, life, at the pace of wax. You follow a crunching trail of boot prints toward a squat building with a chimney shaped like a bent spoon. Above the door, a wooden sign swings gently in the breeze. Lycklig Ljusverkstad, the happy waxworks. Inside, it's warm and chaotic. Tables are covered in bowls of herbs, bins of wax shavings, molds shaped like birds, boots, moons, vegetables, teeth. It smells like lavender, anise, and mild confusion. People bustle about in aprons stained the color of ambition and dried honey. This is where the village's experimental candles are born. A man waves you over, holding a candle shaped like an eggplant with a glowing core. It glows brighter when you lie, he whispers. Very inconvenient at family dinners. A teenager nearby is working on a weather candle meant to predict snow. So far, it's just become damp and sulky. It's accurate, but not helpful, she admits. Another woman holds up what looks like a candle, but smells suspiciously like tomato soup. Dinner candle, she says. Meant to trick my children into thinking I've cooked. You ask if it works. No, but it keeps them polite until I microwave something. The head of the workshop is a tall, soft-spoken man named Ulf. He moves through the chaos like a tree in a storm, unbothered, gently bending, never breaking. He shows you the memory flame, a candle laced with scents thought to trigger nostalgia. Wood smoke, orange peel, pages from a used book. We've had 3 people cry, 2 laugh, and 1 claim they remembered being a goat in a past life, he says. We count that as a success. Historians later debate whether this workshop sparked a rural renaissance or was simply a cozy way to pass long winters. One essay calls it an unregulated temple of scented resistance. Another refers to it simply as wax anarchy. At the back of the room is a wall labeled Candle Regrets. Here, the less successful inventions are displayed. A candle that pops popcorn, too enthusiastically. A candle shaped like a banana that confused everyone, including the monkeys at the nearby petting farm. One labeled Candle That Screams, a wick soaked in peppermint oil that crackled in a way no one enjoyed. Below each is a hand-scrawled note, tried with love, failed with grace. You exit into the night with a small cube-shaped candle that allegedly helps with unclear thinking. It smells like pencil shavings and soft cheese. You're not sure if it's helping, but you do suddenly remember where you left your other mitten. Back in the village square, the snow has been swept away in a neat circle. Inside it, people are forming a spiral, candle holders in hand, flames protected by jars, paper shades, woolen sleeves. No one speaks. It's the walking flame, a quiet ritual done only a few times each winter. The idea is simple. One candle starts, passed from hand to hand in absolute silence. But with each pass, the person must think of something they've let go of. Not confess, not speak. Just feel it burn out of them as the flame moves on. When it's your turn, the warmth of the flame touches your palm gently. like a friend who doesn't need to say anything. You hold it just long enough, then pass it on. Later, as the crowd disperses like breath in cold air, you spot a small booth where someone is selling candle readings. Curious, you sit down. The reader, a man with a scarf too long for practicality, lights a small pillar and watches the way it burns. He murmurs, "The flame pulls left. Restlessness. But see how steady? That's memory doing its best. The drip leans regret, or maybe just too much porridge. The base isn't melting. There's something you're not ready to let go of. But that's okay. Wax waits. You ask what he sees in the smoke. He grins. Mostly other people's dinners, but occasionally something real. He hands you the stub and says, "Let it finish at home, quietly. Don't blow it out. Let it end on its own terms." Outside his booth, a young girl stands beside a snowbank, holding a candle in both hands. She tells you it's called a hope wick. She doesn't explain further. She just lights it, then hands it to you, then walks away. You carry it with you, flame trembling slightly in the night breeze, careful not to move too fast. You pass an old barn where someone has drawn candle shapes in the snow. One has wings, another a crown. One has melted entirely, leaving just the imprint. At the village church, long since retired from official sermons, you see candles arranged in rows, not by importance or size, but by the way they lean. Left for sorrow, right for joy, straight for those who don't know yet. The caretaker, a kind woman who smells like cedar wood and biscuits, tells you that lighting a candle here is a promise. Not to anyone else, just to yourself. You choose one from the unsure row, light it, and walk away before you can change your mind. You wake, or maybe you never quite slept, curled beneath a woolen blanket someone tucked around your shoulders, while you rested on a bench outside the old clockmaker's house. The snow crunches beneath your boots as you stand, candle stub still clutched in your glove like a forgotten idea. Dawn threatens on the edge of the sky, but it's a quiet kind of dawn. Not loud, not boastful. Just there. The streets are nearly empty now, save for the gentle sweep of a broom somewhere, and a soft, rhythmic tapping. A baker kneading dough to the beat of her own sleep-deprived lullaby. You wander again, this time toward the one place you haven't dared to visit yet. The mayor's office. You find it nestled between a bookshop that only sells blank journals and a flower stall that only sells petals, not full blooms. The office itself is modest, the kind of place where everything smells like paper and beeswax polish, and where the chairs are slightly too soft, as if designed for indecision. Inside, the mayor, Magda, is seated at a desk cluttered with tiny candles arranged like paperwork. Her spectacles are fogged slightly, and she's muttering to herself as she dips a quill into a jar of ink that may or may not be melted licorice. You clear your throat. She looks up. "Did you come about the flame permits?" she asks, half hopeful, half horrified. You shake your head. She sighs with audible relief and waves you in. "Good. I hate the flame permits. No one understands them. Not even the candles." Magda is not what you'd expect from a mayor. Her sweater has a stain in the shape of Finland, and her hair is held up by what looks like a breadstick. But her eyes? Her eyes are candlelight incarnate, warm, searching, a little tired, but always lit. You ask her about the candle tax, the real story. She leans back, pours tea into a mug labeled "Lighten Up," and says, "The tax was never about wax. It was about control and timing, and who gets to say when night ends." She tells you the earliest records of the candle tax are vague. Some say it was implemented to save tallow. Others say it was introduced after a goat caught fire and spooked the bishop. "No one agrees," she says, "which means it was probably just a terrible idea with good handwriting." Historians still debate the real reason. One theory suggests the crown wanted to limit after-dark gatherings, fearing whispered rebellions and too much dancing. Another suggests someone misread a bill about fish oil. Magda pulls out a parchment labeled Exceptions and Oddities. Candles lit during sneezes, exempt. Candles used to find missing left shoes, taxed double. Candles named after grandmothers, untaxable due to emotional complications. She points to one clause with a smirk. No taxes may be levied on lights lit for the purpose of storytelling, provided the story includes at least one goose and a mild surprise. That, she says, is why bedtime tales are sacred here. She stands, stretches, and leads you through a back door into a narrow courtyard. There, a single candle burns in a glass dome, untouched by wind or weather. It's been burning, Magda claims, for 7 years straight. We call it the municipal flame, she says. Technically, it represents civic unity. Actually, it just refuses to go out. We've tried. It burned through 3 domes, ignited a basket of pickles, survived a cat's attempt to knock it over. Some say it's possessed. Others think it's just stubborn. Personally, I think it knows it's being watched. You ask what would happen if it went out. Magda shrugs. We'd probably just relight it, but we'd do it very dramatically. She lets you hold the dome for a moment, your breath fogging the glass slightly. The flame doesn't even flinch. It's as steady as your pulse, or maybe steadier. Later, as you prepare to leave, Magda hands you a scroll. It's your wax license, she says. Honorary, useless, but official. The paper reads, bearer of this scroll is hereby permitted to light candles for purposes of A. Gentle rebellion. B. Slightly exaggerated bedtime stories. C. Remembering something warm without needing to explain it. D. Falling asleep while pretending to care about municipal records. You roll it up carefully, tuck it into your coat, and nod. The mayor smiles. You're one of us now. Back outside, the day has brightened into something that resembles a Tuesday. People move through the village like bees. Slow, deliberate, oddly buzzing with leftover dreams. You spot a boy carrying a candle in a lantern shaped like a fish. He stops, turns, and says, "It's for my uncle." He snores in Morse code. Then he walks on. In the central square, someone stacked snow into shapes of former village leaders. Each has a candle perched atop its head like a slightly off-center crown. You recognize none of them. That feels appropriate. You step into a shop selling only candle snuffers. Dozens of them, each more unnecessary than the last. A tiny bell on a stick labeled for flames with opinions. A miniature Viking helmet designed to smother drama. A porcelain duck whose beak gently extinguishes light with a mwah sound. You choose the one shaped like a sleep mask. The clerk says, "That one's best for endings you're not ready for." Outside again, you pass a woman teaching her dog to sniff out expired candles. "He's not very good," she admits, "but he's enthusiastic, and he never judges me." You offer the dog a sniff of your wax cube from earlier. He sneezes once and sits down very seriously, as if solving something you cannot see. You walk until the village begins to thin, houses giving way to fields, fences, quiet. A single candle burns on a fence post. A note beside it says, "For anyone on their way out, or back in, either's fine." You pause. The wind stirs your coat. The flame dances slightly in greeting. And the world, again, feels softly lit from within. By now, the village has slipped into your bones. You know the way the wind curves around the bakery, the smell of pine tar in the old smithy, the specific creak of the second step at the bathhouse. Even the shadows feel familiar. Longer in the alleys, softer by the lakeside, always accompanied by the whisper of candlelight. You find yourself walking a little slower now, as if the place has gently taught you how to. As if somewhere along the way, the wax has dripped onto your clock and changed the speed of time. Today, you head toward the hills just beyond the village. There, nestled among frost-laced birch trees, is the Candle Hermitage. It's not a monastery, not exactly. No vows, no rules, just a quiet stone cottage where people go when they want to spend time alone. with a flame. You're greeted not by a monk, but by a soft-eyed woman named Edda. She wears layers of wool and a necklace made entirely of used matchsticks. "Each one burned for a reason," she says, smiling. "Some of them were mine, some weren't. I never ask." Inside the hermitage is a row of alcoves, each with a stool, a small table, and an unlit candle. You choose one labeled "Not Yet." Edda provides a match, then leaves you alone. The silence is almost weightless. No clocks, no voices, no instructions. You light the candle. The flame flutters, then steadies. You sit with it. Nothing happens, which is the point. After a while, you start to notice things. The way the flame pulls slightly left when you exhale. The gentle cracking sound of wax softening. The way your own thoughts start to arrive, not in words, but in pictures. A memory. A dream. A question you didn't know you had. It is, in every way, gloriously boring. And yet you feel more awake than you have all day. Edda later tells you that people leave notes behind, tucked under their candles, never signed. She's compiled a few over the years. She reads you some. "I thought I was just tired. Turns out I was also sad. This flame reminded me of my father, in a good way, for once. I've been angry for 3 winters. I think I'm done now. The candle didn't tell me what to do, but I think it knew. You ask if she ever writes any herself. She nods. But I burn them. There's something about this place, about the simplicity of watching a thing glow and not demand anything of you, that makes you wonder why the rest of the world feels so loud." Historians who hear of the Hermitage mostly dismiss it as rural mysticism or wax-based idleness. But one, in a footnote that was later redacted, called it the quietest form of protest, choosing stillness in a world that demands momentum. Back down the hill, the village is gathering again, this time for a procession. No music, no speeches, just people walking together, each carrying a candle inside a lantern they've chosen themselves. One is made of stained glass, flickering with reds and blues like a lazy rainbow. Another is a jar stuffed with marbles, the light bouncing in every direction like a disco ball that forgot how to party. Yours is simple. Wooden frame, clear panes, wax-smudged fingerprints from some previous borrower. The procession moves slowly through the village. No destination. Just motion. Just being together without talking about being together. A child drops her lantern. The candle snuffs. Before she can cry, 3 others step forward and relight it from theirs. Nothing is said. Everything is understood. You end up near the lake again, where someone has placed floating candles in the shape of a spiral. They drift slowly, like thoughts too shy to finish themselves. In the middle is a small raft, just big enough for 1 person and 1 very stubborn, wind-proof candle. A name is called Tove. An old woman steps forward, claps her hands once, then boards the raft. The crowd watches as she floats gently into the spiral. No one explains. No one needs to. It's the year flame, an honor given to the person the village has collectively decided carried the most unnoticed weight. Tove waves once, lights the central candle, and begins to hum. The tune is soft and strange, like a lullaby written by someone half asleep. When she returns, her raft trailing the scent of pine and wax, she is greeted not with cheers, but with silence and nods. She has been seen. At the dock, she's handed a new candle, tall, blue, flecked with silver. "For next year," someone says, "you return to your bench, the one near the snuffer shop, and sit for a while with your lantern on your lap." People pass, nodding. A goat tries to chew your mitten. You let it. Above you, the stars emerge, blinking slowly into place like candles lit by the night itself. A breeze curls through the village. Lanterns sway. Not one flame goes out. And somewhere, a candle burns quietly on a kitchen counter, illuminating a slice of pie, a forgotten list, and a note that simply reads, "Light dinner. Everything glows, even the parts of you that used to be too tired to shine." By now, you're no longer just visiting this village. You've slipped into its rhythm like a hand into a well-worn mitten. You know the slope of the rooftops, the hiss of melting snow, the way candlelight lingers on frost-bitten glass like a half-formed memory. You even recognize the dogs now, especially the one who wears a scarf and politely refuses to bark after sundown. Today, you find yourself drawn to the far side of town, past the stone mill, down a lane flanked by crooked fences and fences that seem to have given up altogether. Here, in a tucked-away nook, stands the candle library. You weren't sure if it really existed. Some villagers talked about it in tones usually reserved for ghosts or exceptionally tasty jam. But here it is. A squat wooden building shaped like a teapot, its roof steam-curled by time, its door ajar as if always halfway into a story. Inside, the air is warmer than expected and smells faintly of cloves, old paper, and melted ambition. Shelves curve in spirals, not rows. Each shelf holds candles in glass jars, labeled not by title or author, but by emotion and occasion. You spot, for rereading love letters that weren't meant for you. To be burned while cleaning out a sock drawer and unexpectedly crying. For pretending you're braver than you actually are, but in a good way. The librarian, a tall man with silver eyebrows and hands like woodcuts, greets you with a nod. Looking for fiction, non-fiction, or emotional honesty? He asks, entirely seriously. You stammer something about just browsing. He waves you toward a shelf labeled Unspoken Conversations. You pick up a candle called The Apology You Were Never Owed, but Still Needed. It's heavy. It smells like mint and ink. You ask if the candles are meant to be checked out. He shakes his head. No, they're meant to be remembered. Light one here, leave with the idea of it. That's usually enough. Someone nearby lights Grief on a Tuesday. The flame flickers blue for a moment, then steadies. She closes her eyes and smiles. Historians argue whether this library existed outside of poetic metaphor. Some believe it was a real place, maintained by eccentric bibliophiles with too much wax and too little shelving sense. Others suggest it was a traveling installation, moving from village to village like a wandering circus for the tender-hearted. But here now it feels unmistakably real. You ask if there are any candles about the tax itself. The librarian leads you to a dusty corner where a single stub sits under a bell jar. Its label reads, "For understanding something pointless but beautifully so." He lights it for you. The scent is hard to place. Something between old coins, sheep wool, and the kind of bread you only make when you're avoiding a bigger task. You sit beside it, letting the story settle. Back outside, the clouds are thick again, as if the sky itself has decided to hunker down under a blanket. You wander until you hear faint music drifting from a stone cellar. Curious, you follow it, and discover the candle orchestra. It's not what it sounds like. Or maybe it's exactly what it sounds like, depending on how sleepy you are. Dozens of candles are arranged in carefully tuned glasses, jars, pipes, and boxes. As the flames flicker, they heat air, trigger small bells, move wax weights, and even pluck taut wires. The result is music. Not composed, but coaxed. A woman with soot-smudged cheeks conducts them. Not with a baton, but with gentle breaths and gestures that guide the flames' dance. You sit quietly, surrounded by others wrapped in shawls and silence, as the candles play a lullaby you know you've never heard before, and yet somehow recognize. One movement sounds like your grandmother humming. Another reminds you of that time you almost said what you really felt, but didn't. You leave the cellar lighter, as if the music melted something heavy you were carrying without even asking permission. Further down the lane, you stumble upon a man sitting at a folding table labeled Candle Therapy, Sliding Scale. He gestures to a row of oddly shaped candles. Pick the one that confuses you most, he says. You choose one shaped like a question mark with a wick in the dot. Excellent, he nods. Now stare at it until you either figure it out or realize it doesn't matter. You stare. It doesn't matter. And that's kind of wonderful. As twilight returns, because of course it does, in a place like this, you follow the scent of cardamom to a small square where people have gathered for candle confessions. The idea is simple. You sit at a table, light a candle, and whisper something you've never said out loud. The flame, according to tradition, absorbs it and releases it as warmth instead of judgment. You don't expect to speak, but you do. Only one word. The flame doesn't flicker. It just listens, and then it burns a little brighter. Later, as you walk home, if a borrowed cottage counts as home, you pass a shop where candles are being dressed in little outfits. Someone hands you a wax figure wearing a sweater and says, "His name is Gerald. He's very emotionally available." You carry him for a while, then leave him on a bench where someone else will find him and wonder what he's for. Maybe they'll light him. Maybe they'll keep him forever. Maybe they'll give him a new name. All of that is fine. You look up. The stars have come back, each one a little candle, too far to tax, too bright to snuff. And just like that, you realize, this whole place is a kind of story. One told in wax and flame and silence. One that doesn't ask to be understood, only felt. And you've become part of it. Some nights stretch out like long spools of ribbon. This one feels endless in the most peaceful way. Like the world has tucked you in and left a candle on the windowsill just in case you wake with a thought too delicate for darkness. You rise early, or maybe you never quite slept again, and find yourself pulled toward the village edge to a path you've somehow missed until now. A crooked little sign points ahead, its letters faded. The candle path. For those who think too much, it's not a joke. The path winds gently into a low forest. Along the trail, every few meters, sits a candle in a protective glass dome, flickering patiently, like breadcrumbs left by someone gentle and forgetful. Each dome is labeled, some with phrases, some with questions, some with nothing at all. You pass the first. What would you say if no one interrupted? The flame leans sideways, as if eavesdropping. A few steps later, this one's just here to keep your toes warm. You smile, it does. You walk slowly, each flame a small invitation to stop, to wonder, to simply breathe. One candle is marked, "Do not light unless you've forgiven yourself at least once today." It's already burning. Another says, "This one knows your secrets. It likes them." You reach a small bench, half covered in moss and kindness. A note nearby reads, "Rest here if you've been pretending you're fine too loudly." You sit. The candle in front of you is the color of honey left too long in the cupboard. It smells faintly of clove and unanswered questions. You let it burn while you watch the snow drift gently onto the path, like quiet punctuation. Eventually you rise and continue on. The final dome is cracked but still upright. The candle inside is nearly spent, just a stub, guttering softly. Its label reads, "You've made it. You're allowed to come back." You don't need to ask what it means. You already know. As you return, you notice the village in a new way. It's not just charming or strange. It's generous. It's built on the belief that ordinary things, wax, light, quiet, can become sacred if you pay enough attention. Back near the main square, people are setting up for what they call the candle swap. A long table is spread with cloth, and villagers begin arriving with wrapped bundles, candles they've made, been gifted, or accidentally created when trying to fix something else. Each is exchanged with ceremony that is entirely improvised. A wax goose is traded for a star-shaped taper. A twisty, barely burns candle is swapped for one that smells like unexpected optimism. A candle that cries real wax tears is left in the center for whoever needs it next. You're handed a stubby, lopsided candle that looks like a duck, but definitely wasn't meant to. "This one," the old woman says with a wink, "is terribly unlucky at chess, but quite good at remembering names." You place your own candle. Your favorite one, the one that smells like pencils and ideas, on the table. It's picked up almost immediately by a boy with skinned knees and serious eyes. He doesn't say thank you. He just nods, like you've passed him a secret map. After the swap, the villagers drift off, leaving behind a trail of wax flecks like breadcrumbs leading nowhere in particular. You follow your feet toward the lake again. Tonight, it's completely still. The floating candles are gone, and in their place, someone has arranged dozens of unlit tapers along the edge, each waiting for the wind to decide who burns first. You stand with them. Someone beside you hums. Someone else sneezes, apologizes to the candles, then lights one anyway. There's no grand ritual, no countdown, just a quiet patience. Eventually, one candle catches, then another, and another, until the lake's edge glows like the outline of a story still being written. Historians don't know what to make of the candle path, the candle swap, or the slow-burning lakeside vigils. Some claim they were invented out of sheer boredom. Others believe they were the village's way of gently rebelling against a world that demanded speed and logic. One simply wrote, "They burned light to make space for the parts of us we'd forgotten." You step back from the lake and realize the village isn't asleep. It's dreaming. And you're in the dream. One last place calls to you. The little workshop you passed your first day, the one with the crooked sign that said, "Fixing Broken Light." Inside, a man is repairing old candle holders. He doesn't speak, just nods to a stool. He hands you a bit of wax and a wick, points to a mold. You make a candle, awkwardly, lopsided, too tall, but it stands. He lights it, and in that moment, the room fills with a soft glow. Not from your candle, but from all the others. Dozens, hundreds, all burning quietly in silent agreement. Yes, this mattered. Yes, this happened. Yes, it's okay now. You carry your candle out into the night. It's clumsy, uneven. Perfect. The snow has softened into that muffled kind of quiet that only happens when the world agrees to hush all at once. Your breath fogs the air in gentle puffs, each one caught by the flickering light of the candle you just made. It's strange how proud you feel of this tiny thing. It's not symmetrical. It's a bit lumpy. The wick is off-center, and yet it glows with the stubbornness of something born to be useful. You walk slowly through the sleeping village, your candle in hand. You pass shuttered windows, each with a little flicker of flame peeking through, as if the houses themselves are blinking back sleepily. You find yourself outside the bakery again. The scent of cardamom still lingers in the snowbanks. Someone has left a candle on the doorstep, burning in a teacup. The label reads, "For tomorrow's dough." No one knows what it means. No one questions it. You continue past the clock tower, its face gently fogged by the warmth from its own lanterns. Once, long ago, someone tried to replace its winding mechanism with candle heat. It worked for 4 hours and melted the bell. The bell still rings, softly, crookedly, and always 6 minutes late. The villagers adjusted their schedules rather than fix it. As you make your way back toward the little cottage you've come to call home, you notice more candles lining the paths now. Some newly lit, some barely hanging on, some burned down to a puddle of wax, with the wick curled like a comma. The story isn't ending. It's just pausing. You reach your doorstep and pause with the key in hand. There's a box sitting by the door. Inside, one snuffer, one jar of matches, and a note that simply says, "Thanks for noticing. The village." You step inside. Everything smells like warmed wool and candle smoke. On the table is the wax cube from days ago, now soft around the edges, its scent deeper somehow. More you than before. You set your new candle in the windowsill, light it, and watch the glow spill across the frost-trimmed glass. It's the last flame you'll light here, at least this visit. Historians rarely agree on what happened in this village. Whether the candle tax was real, whether the rituals were old or invented last Tuesday, whether people really believed their flames held memories, or whether it was all one big sleepy joke that got out of hand. But that's the thing about history. Sometimes the facts are just scaffolding for the warmth. You sit down with your tea, lukewarm, perfectly so, and stare at the flame. It dances a little, so do your thoughts. And then slowly, gently, you let go. The candle burns lower now, its flame softened to a whisper. The shadows on the wall lengthen and blur, stretching like cats settling into long evening naps. You feel your breath slow. Even your thoughts begin to move differently. Fewer edges, more curves. No questions to answer now. Just a glow to follow. Outside, the last of the snow hushes the world one flake at a time. The village has quieted entirely. The last footsteps long since muffled. The last windows drawn shut. But behind every shuttered window, a flicker. Someone else with a light. Someone else leaning back in their chair, exhaling into the gentle dark. The scent of your candle, whatever it is, whatever it's become, wraps around the room like a scarf you didn't know you needed. You've traveled through stories tonight, about taxes no one minded, about flames that refused to behave, about people who lit their lives in soft rebellion. And now you're here, at the edge of sleep. Let the weight of the night sink into the mattress. Let your limbs forget what tension feels like. There's nothing left to do. No mysteries to solve. No endings to rush. The flame in the window flickers one last time as a breeze curls past the glass. But it doesn't go out. It settles. Like you. And the village dreams on, gently lit by 1,000 tiny promises made of wax and time. Good night.